Thank you. This show would not be nearly as but you can edit that part out. Actually, that's probably where you're gonna start it, knowing you. Thanks. Thanks. Welcome to Under Fire, burning questions about poverty and policy with the Port Angeles Food Bank. Every episode, we turn up the heat, literally and figuratively, by inviting local leaders to take on a lineup of hot wings, while answering tough questions about food insecurity, housing, and what it really takes to build a more just Clallam County. I'm Neil Dexter, Donor Relationship Manager for the Port Angeles Food Bank. Today's guest is Port Angeles City Manager Nathan West.
Good morning.
We're honored to have him here in the hot seat today as we talk about the challenges and opportunities facing Clallam County and Port Angeles specifically. A huge thank you to our sauce donors. We've added a couple today. We have Woodinville Sauce Company, Monkey's Hot Sauce Factory, Elixir Sauce Company, Seafire Gourmet, and Bootsy's Sauce Company. This show wouldn't be nearly as sweaty without you. Before we get started, do you want to tell us a little bit about your role as the city manager for Port Angeles?
Absolutely. So I'm Nathan West. I'm the city manager for the city of Port Angeles, and I've been city manager for 7 years now at the city. And the role requires a great deal of diversity relative to overseeing a variety of departments, everything from emergency services, including police and fire, to community and economic development, public works, parks and recreation, and a legal department. We also have a finance department, but the best part about being city manager is the diversity of the job. Every day is different, a lot of challenges come our way, and most importantly, it gives me an opportunity to ensure the city of Port Angeles is constantly caring about our community members.
Clarify for a second, because I know that I've experienced some confusion. Would you say your role is more closely defined by what people would typically think of as the mayor of a town? And you're the executive essentially?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of confusion there sometimes, but I think we have a specific type of government in Port Angeles, which is known as the council manager form of government. And what that does is it puts the city council in the legislative branch and the policy development branch of city government, whereas I serve in the executive role of city government. And it ensures that I am responsible for the daily operations of the city and the oversight of the individual staff members of the city.
Our first sauce is Dos Aches from Woodinville Sauce Company.
Cheers.
Cheers. What do you see as the biggest challenge facing Port Angeles families right now when it comes to economic security?
The biggest challenge is absolutely related to housing. And I think that's one of the reasons for the city of Port Angeles, we have had housing as a top priority for us to work on as a major project, major improvements through incentives, through changing our policies, our codes. That really is a major impact, and it so much ties into what we're talking about today, and plays into food insecurity. And the reason that it plays into food insecurity is that we believe that approximately 56% of all our Clallam County community members have food insecurities in a lot of big ways. It plays into housing because so many people are forced to overextend themselves relative to what they pay in rent, what they pay for the cost to own a house. And unfortunately, that overextension has compromised their budget relative to what they're capable of purchasing with food. And so housing is really important to get that right. And it's important relative to all of the different costs that every individual in Clallam County and in Port Angeles has to think about in their monthly budget. At the end of the day, what can be sacrificed? Where is their flexibility? And most frequently, food is what people have to sacrifice. And that's really a major concern and something that we need to think a lot about as we develop our plans and improvements moving forward.
Okay. So to clarify, you say changing our codes, changing policies. Is there any examples you could give for like a code change that would affect housing development or density growth or anything along those lines?
Absolutely. So I think one of the main starting points that we had with our different housing implementation tools was looking at the zoning code and recognizing that for anyone attempting to develop a lot, and if you think about it, development at the end of the day ends up in the place of having a renter or occupant who has to pay an ultimate cost. And so what was done at the city was actually break down a typical 7,000 square foot lot and allow 4 different units on that same lot, whereas previously only 1 unit could be accommodated on that 7,000 square foot lot.
Okay.
So a big example from a cost perspective, at the end of the day, it helps that development pencil out. We also need to drive more in the direction of multifamily housing. And I think that's so important because we need more rental opportunities. So few people have the income and the capability to purchase in Port Angeles. We want to make sure that people have ample opportunity to rent, and by growing the multifamily opportunities, it's really going to help. So incentives for multifamily have included, the city of Port Angeles has waived all of the different fees for permitting relative to multifamily development. They've also provided a multifamily tax exemption, which basically eliminates property tax for between 8 and 12 years, depending on the affordability of that housing. And Port Angeles actually took the most unique approach statewide on that incentive. Basically, for giving that property tax, in most jurisdictions, they decide we're going to do that in this one little area, district, or zone within our community.
Right.
Port Angeles did that citywide.
Oh, wow.
So that incentive is across the board in the city for those willing to develop multifamily housing. They can have their property tax essentially forgiven for multiple years.
Does that only count for new construction, or if someone was to purchase a home and convert it into a duplex or triplex?
So from a redevelopment perspective, it would also work if you are converting. For example, we have a Peninsula Behavioral Health project occurring right now in the city of Port Angeles, and that was a complete redevelopment of a building. And by redeveloping that building, there is an opportunity to get that exemption as well.
Our next sauce is La Diosa Verde from Seafire Gourmet. I'll let you know when you need to start worrying. Cheers. Housing costs are rising faster than wages for many people here. What tools does the city have to help close that gap?
Housing costs are something that again, we've really focused on thinking about how all of that works. And I think one really important component that I didn't mention as we talked about housing just a second ago,
that's why I set you
is
up.
Utility rates.
Okay.
And so again, incomes don't cover the need for housing costs, therefore people are overextending with their housing purchases, with what they choose to rent. Utilities also come into play there. And so for that reason, we've had a number of opportunities where council has implemented low income opportunities for the utilities that they pay on a regular basis, but also focusing on, as we develop rates, recognizing this has a major impact on whether someone's able to maintain their housing and of course also maintain their food security at the end of the day. But the utility rates really matter because if you do not pay your utility bill and your power or water get turned off, most likely you're not going to be able to continue to occupy that housing. Right. And so we've got to find creative ways to keep those utility rates low and make sure that we have ample opportunity for people who do not have the income to cover it, to basically see some incentives or see some programs that really help them survive, particularly during the winter months.
Yeah, it's harder than I suppose. Is there any specific program that you would steer people towards, or is this just kind of like a blanket across the board management of cost or reduction of cost?
Yeah, we do have a kind of blanket across the board for all utilities, a low income program that can be applied, that you can apply for at the city of Port Angeles to basically help you get through some of those utility challenges.
Okay. Do you have
as well as we want to ensure that we take every step to make sure that if it comes down to not being able to pay a bill, or maybe someone loses their job and has major needs, we take the opportunity to work out payment plans with everyone who has a need. Rather than just say, I'm sorry, we're cutting off your power.
Right.
We work with individuals on a regular basis to help them achieve an agreement or a contract to keep the power and the water
That's great.
On.
Okay. So just call the city if you have an issue?
Call the city if you have an issue. We have a customer service representative, Kathy Ellen Haney, who is extremely good at helping customers out when they have a need.
Excellent. All right, moving on. Our next sauce is garlic Fresno from Elixir. This is the first time we've tried this one here, so this is exciting. I don't think it's too spicy. We'll see. Well, cheers.
Cheers, Neil.
So what role do you think the city can play in ensuring new development doesn't just bring more houses, but truly affordable homes?
So the city has so many different areas of responsibility with it's all about recognizing that the decisions we make at the city also impact community members and their housing choices. So from a regulation perspective, the codes matter. I'll give you an example that we're working on now that greatly impacts the affordability of housing, and that's a sidewalk in lieu program, recognizing if someone wants to put in housing, they're also, because in Washington State, we're under the Growth Management Act, and the Growth Management Act requires that we have infrastructure that coincides with every bit of development that occurs in the city. But that infrastructure is also really expensive. And so when you have a sidewalk that you need to put in, that can be a major cost element of a project that oftentimes can tip the scales relative to affordability. And so last Tuesday night at council, we brought forward a sidewalk in lieu program so that individuals can actually have the option of making another choice and having a contribution of funds towards a sidewalk, perhaps in another location. There's a couple trade-offs and benefits there by doing that. And in one case, you might have a property where you're trying to do a multifamily development and there's different topography, elevations, and things like that. And with sidewalks, you have to maintain a certain slope.
Yeah.
And when you do that, it can get very expensive if you have difficult topography.
Yeah.
This program allows you to contribute a certain dollar amount, and it can be put towards a sidewalk in another area. Maybe it goes towards a school walking route, or it goes to an area where we really need some ADA responsible improvements with sidewalks, and it's a cheaper path for the development.
Right.
Oftentimes too, we have basically the state of Washington requires we also have a stormwater permit, which looks at every bit of development on the ground and says how much of that is actually infiltrating water and how much is not. And so you have additional cost to your development if you're not appropriately infiltrating the water, and that sidewalk creates an impermeable surface, which water doesn't penetrate, and it goes into calculations which can also make a development more expensive. So with this new option, you can do a sidewalk somewhere else and it's not going to impact those two factors.
So it's not really even a one-for-one, because it's mitigating a potentially exorbitant cost while still contributing to a more economical sidewalk installation somewhere else.
That's right.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I do hear about people frustrated that like, oh, I want to build a house.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. The house costs X, but it's the extra permitting costs, the extra costs that the city tacks on, or that they think the city's going to tack on, that kind of prohibits them from moving forward.
Right.
So yeah, knowing that there's tools to be able to mitigate some of those costs. That's great. All right, moving on. Our next sauce is Wild Child. Was it Funky's Hot Sauce Factory? I'm just gonna pour it all over the place. Cheers.
Thanks, Neil.
Many people are working full-time, yet still struggling to cover the basics. What does a living wage look like in Port Angeles? And how do we move closer to making that a reality?
It's a great question. So I think a big part of that is how we factor in economic development in the city of Port Angeles. And I think while while the city cares a great deal about economic development, I think part of that is building our economic base. Now, the city's accountability there is infrastructure and constructing the infrastructure necessary to provide opportunities for economic development within the community. That's a primary responsibility, but also we care about those living wages. And so as we're looking at new opportunities, whether it's for a major employer to come into town, we can ensure that that infrastructure is ready and available for those new opportunities. But I think probably more importantly, because it's really amazing when you think about how much Port Angeles has achieved from an economic development perspective, just by having some great entrepreneurs in town, and recognizing that most of the success of our economic base in this community is really about people who have decided, I'm going to start up a business, I'm going to do this on my own, and it's really facilitating the growth and entrepreneurship of individuals within the community. So part of that is making it easier for them when they come to the permitting counter and they need to get occupancy in a new space, making sure that they have an opportunity to get in the door efficiently, making sure that they have predictability, making sure that they have buildings that are safe relative to fire, and we have a new firing program out there that's looking specifically at that. But really, what will build, at the end of the day, better incomes in Port Angeles is making sure that business community and that economic base is very healthy.
Our next sauce, garlic jalapeno,
Wow.
also from Elixir. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. Childcare costs are a huge burden for working families. Is the city looking at ways to support more accessible, affordable childcare?
Absolutely. So we recognize that childcare is often a decision maker for individuals in our community as to whether they join the workforce or not. And that's a really big deal. We want everyone to feel like they have an opportunity to join the workforce and basically be employed, therefore having a better income to be able to afford housing and afford food. I think that's extremely important. So for probably the last 5 years at least, we have had as one of our top 3 legislative priorities childcare, recognizing that following the pandemic, we had a number of childcare private sector businesses shut down, and we have a substantial need that we're not currently accommodating. So one of the things that we have done is really ensuring that we're supporting the different programs and entities that are providing childcare in our community. That includes the YMCA, it includes the Boys and Girls Club, and William Shore Pool is another one. All 3 of them have received significant grant opportunities from the city of Port Angeles, as well as we've been supporting them, particularly YMCA, with their new development that they're constructing right now. It's under construction. We're really excited about that program for young families to have opportunities for childcare in that new building. And so we've been supporting that from a financial perspective as well as a federal legislative perspective, making sure that project has the funding it needs to survive.
Okay. Is there anything that you would say is geared towards supporting those private sector companies as well, in possibly courting some of them coming back? Or
Yeah, I think that is, part of the legislative priority component that I mentioned, making sure that we are engaged with our local or state legislators to understand the ramifications of regulations that come down to those private sector businesses. And quite frankly, I think all of our state delegation of representatives, including Senator Chapman, Representative Birnbaum, and Representative Theringer, all get it and really emphasize in the legislature, and we've seen some positive changes that show they recognize the burden from a regulatory perspective, how difficult it can be to open a private sector facility for childcare. So we're hoping to see that change significantly.
excellent. Yeah, I mean, it's got to be hard because you have to balance cost with safety.
Absolutely.
And obviously, as a parent, I would never want to leave my child at a place where we signed up last weekend and here we are. We can take your kid now. Like that,
Right.
that's a little unnerving, but
Yeah.
but at the same time, they need to be able to afford to be in business. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a hard balance. Our next sauce is Santaka from Woodinville Sauce Company.
Cheers, Neil.
Cheers. When you look at our downtown and business community, what's being done to make sure growth supports both employers and workers fairly?
That's a really interesting question. I think it's within the downtown business community, we want to ensure that there's good support for that entire community. And it's not just downtown, it really is. We want to see all of our business districts thrive at the end of the day. But specific to downtown, we have recently contracted with the Waterfront District to reinvigorate some of the programs we had previously, including the Main Street program, including some of the, I'm starting to feel that spice a little bit.
It's there.
So the Waterfront District has really stepped up implementing new plans, but also providing that necessary support. And so it has the opportunity to bring more marketing relative to downtown events, downtown gatherings, downtown shopping, which at the end of the day helps everyone employed in our downtown businesses. And so we've seen some good work. I know recently they've met with the Main Street program, trying to get that back on track.
Right.
They have a number of exciting projects that they actually presented on last week that they're doing to really
Cool.
Get new promotions and also keep those old ones alive, including the downtown trick or treat opportunity,
Right.
and some of the other really important events.
Yeah, which is interesting because that would be an internal or an inward facing, I think, town centric advertising. Whereas, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, my impression is that downtown kind of holds or takes the brunt of the tourism industry, especially with the influx of people on the Coho coming in a couple times a day. So would you say that the Waterfront District and the Main Street is looking outside of Port Angeles to try to bring more dollars in town, or would you say it's more focused on internally advertising and promoting our own town to ourselves?
Yeah, I think it's actually doing both, and
Okay.
I think it's interesting because if you look at it, both our Chamber of Commerce and our Waterfront District are receiving funding from our lodging tax fund at the City of Port Angeles. And that fund predominantly focuses on marketing to outside individuals and bringing them in town to spend money, which is really a great thing for everyone because you're bringing in basically tax revenues from outside of their community, and it lessens the burden on our average citizen in Port Angeles. So I think that's a really important component, that some of that is lodging tax based revenue stream that's coming into the businesses in downtown predominantly, but also throughout town. And then I think the second portion is we really want to make sure that we're having an environment of inviting all of the locals to come downtown regularly, and so that everybody feels extremely happy that we're doing some placemaking there.
Yeah.
So it's an enjoyable space, which is kind of the other half of what we're seeing worked on in the downtown, and that's new plans under Elevate PA, the plan that was done then. And that was a city-funded plan.
Right.
And it's really important to know that that plan is being implemented with the goal to, at the end of the day, create an amazing space in downtown, as well as to incentivize and inspire new investments in the downtown area. And I think it's really doing just that. I think Field Hall is a great example of a starting point for that. We're hopefully soon going to see Faro Marine Life Center with the new Marine Discovery Center, and the Tribes Longhouse, and a number of really great things happening in our downtown. And I think that's exciting, and it can really raise the bar for the success of everyone, both employees in the businesses and the businesses themselves in our downtown area.
Carla Caballero from Woodinville Sauce Company.
I think there's a prize if you make it through the whole lineup without taking a sip of milk.
Oh, good.
Yeah, the prize is that you get to have a cup of milk.
Cheers.
Cheers. Food insecurity remains high in Clallam County. How do you see the city working with organizations like the Food Bank to make sure no one goes hungry? See? It's in there.
I had to go for the water. One of the things that the city can do, and that we're working on now, is an update to our comprehensive plan, right? And the city's comprehensive plan under the Washington State Growth Management Act is our foundational policy document. So getting that one right, it leads to other steps such as regulations, such as policy within the city, and it's really an important starting point to get that policy going. And we got some really good input this year relative to our strategic plan, and I'm going for the Vilk.
Yeah, you got it.
The comprehensive plan, guides our strategic plan, it guides our policy, it guides our regulation. But some input we got is, let's take a look at some of those regulations that actually impact food supply in the community. And if you think traditionally about the Growth Management Act, it was designed to make everything agricultural outside the city limits and everything urban within the city limits. So it basically pushed out a little bit more milk.
Just wait till the stellar fuzz. That one's a little spicier.
Hopefully there's more milk beyond that glass.
Oh yeah, we got a little bit.
So with the design of the Growth Management Act, you have these distinct areas. And so in addition to that, you have the historic context of zoning applied throughout the nation, which is, let's keep farm animals outside of city limits, and let's really tightly restrict uses between one another. And for us, that historically has meant no farm animals, no goats, no cows, no hooved animals of any kind in the city limits, and even no chickens. But if you look at the new input to the comprehensive plan, we're now looking at things like, let's make sure we allow some animal husbandry within the community. Let's get back to ensuring that people have the opportunity to do some of growing their own food. Let's make sure we have some garden space available either in the right of way or on properties. Let's make sure that we have space for chickens, maybe some smaller farm animals and things that don't create a nuisance to the neighbors. But those are policies that are actually being introduced in our latest version of the comprehensive plan that we're expecting to have done before the end of the year. So I think that's a big deal. Another one I'll throw out there is, historically, we probably about 10 years ago, we developed a street tree program. And that street tree program said, let's prohibit fruit trees in the right of way because of the mess they make.
Yeah.
Well, one of the policies that is being introduced is, let's get back to having fruit trees because they're actually an easy way for families who don't have a lot of income to basically grow some of their own food. And it's really getting back to the basics of making sure that people can help themselves with gardening, with maybe eggs, with some fruit, and all of that makes a difference, right? Because if you look statistically at food insecurities, really protein and fresh produce are some of the most difficult things for individuals to decide to pay money for when they've got these other pressures relative to housing and utilities.
Right. Well, especially if you're in a food desert.
Right.
Then those are two of the last things you're going to find. Usually, if you're in a food desert, it's processed sugars and other carbohydrates that are cheap to manufacture and store for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you're aware of our gleaning program that we've been working with, and so
very cool.
A shameless plug for the food bank to be in that comprehensive plan would be somehow incorporating that gleaning program that we work with Washington State University Extension to incorporate that to give people who would like to grow those fruit trees an opportunity, somewhere to call to say, hey, I've got too many apples to pick right now. Is there somebody that can come by and pick it? Because I know that we do work with individuals, in the city who have a fruit tree. You can call Wazoo right now and get somebody to come out or you could
Yeah, it's been a great program, and
Yeah.
it's a program I've been familiar with for a really long time, and I love that program. I think it's very possible it's already built in there as policy, but I think that is the Washington State Extension. You know, the programs that they have, I think, are really helpful relative to creating and finding one's own produce, but also getting other food resources. So another example of a good program for food that came out of Washington State Extension, I believe, is our food pantries. And we've got about 26 of those in Clallam County. I think we've got about 12 in the city of Port Angeles. But that's another opportunity to ensure that if people have excess, they've got a place to put their food, and
Right.
if they have need, that they can go to one of those pantries and get a little bit more food.
All right, Stellar Fuzz from Funky's Hot Sauce Factory is our next sauce.
I would say it's probably a tiny bit more spicy than the garlic habanero.
Okay.
So, can we make sure we have some milk lined up, just in case?
Cheers.
All right, what partnerships, regional, state, or nonprofit, do you think are most critical to solving these interconnected issues of housing, wages, and poverty?
Yeah. So I don't think there's one resource that you listed that is more important than another. I think it's so important to recognize that this community has developed a way of coming together to make things happen. And so it's so important to know that, you know, as a local government, we cannot be anything and everything for everyone. And we only do a little bit. And really what is out there making success for community members are the many nonprofits that we have in this community who have basically stepped up, and as well as just the generous private citizen donors who have helped these nonprofits. And everywhere you look, there's amazing things happening with our local nonprofit organizations and our other local organizations like the Chamber of Commerce and just groups and entities that are out there. Our service clubs do amazing things in this community. And I think it's a reason to celebrate in Port Angeles that we really see everyone supporting one another in this community, and I'm really happy for that.
Fire Roasted Fresno from Bootsy's Sauce Company. These last two, I'm sorry. Cheers.
Cheers.
If you could secure one new resource or policy change tomorrow that would most improve quality of life in Port Angeles, what would it be? Gotta get creative on this one.
Resource, yeah. So yeah, if I were have to pick one new resource that would really make a difference in this community, I would say that new resource would be a large multifamily housing project that tackles the overall number of multifamily need we have out there in the community. And we're talking about big numbers, we're talking about hundreds of units.
Yeah.
But we need something substantial that actually makes a dent in the housing crisis that we have in Port Angeles. And so for that reason, I think it would be a major difference maker, particularly if we can keep that at an affordable housing level and not just your attainable housing level. But if we were able to see hundreds of units implemented at an affordable level, it would make all the difference. And I think it also, you know, just it would be a game changer for the overall housing market in the community. And I think we'd see positive ripple effects throughout.
Excellent. Yeah, I think about where could you put it?
Right.
And the one property, not that I don't want Goodwill to be successful, the one property I can think of off the bat that like I think would work really well is where Rite Aid was and Goodwill is.
Yeah.
It's already a giant parking lot, so I don't think you have much to worry about with the stormwater problem. It's already got sidewalks, so you don't have to worry about that. But it's also got the structure that you could go up a good number of stories and create a large structure there.
The 6th and Lincoln site, just on the southeast corner of 6th and Lincoln, I think might be the one you're referring to. That it's right now sitting vacant, fenced off, and
across the street from that
but
parking lot.
across the street from that would be great. But I think what you've said is so important, right? Because what we need to recognize as a community is there's going to be the need to redevelop, not just start with a new piece of property.
Yeah.
And we can pretty much guarantee that we're going to have to find a location that has existing development on it and see that converted to housing. And there's loads of opportunities for that. We have, quite a few older, in some cases dilapidated, vacant buildings that really need to be turned around. And what a great opportunity, right, to really get those housing units you need at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, and if there are those incentive programs to mitigate your tax burden for the next number of years, I mean, if you're looking at a property like Rite Aid and Goodwill, I mean, that's over $15,000 a year in property taxes. If I was to turn around and create multifamily housing there, to be able to say, okay, what's 15 times 8, or what's 15 times 10, to be able to save $150,000 over the next 10 years on the property taxes alone, that hopefully that could make up a little bit of the cost of redeveloping that space, because you'd probably be looking at a demolition and then reconstruction versus being able to go in and just throw up some walls.
Absolutely.
So-
And long term, right, after you get past the exemption period, it actually contributes and benefits the bigger tax base for the community,
Right.
which eventually ensures that there's more share for everyone to go around and
Right.
improves everybody's world.
Well, and isn't that the hard, I mean, it's kind of the rub with, okay, I built multifamily housing, now I don't have to pay property taxes, and what effect does that have on our schools? What effect does that have on our fire districts? What effect does, if everybody converted their property to multifamily, well, what do you do with no property taxes? It suddenly gets a little difficult to run an effective city. So I don't understand how complex that problem would be to solve.
It definitely is, but I will say too, while we really value single family investments, and it's nice to see any new investment in Port Angeles, I think it's important to note that at the end of the day, single families are not what ensure we pencil out utility rates for everyone. They are not what ensures that the tax base, including property tax and sales tax, is sufficient enough to cover the costs of the city long term. We're talking 30 years from now.
Yeah.
And so we really need to think about the density and making sure we're achieving adequate density to cover the costs in the future, so we don't continue to have food insecurities and economic challenges ahead.
Yeah. If only it were easy, right?
Right.
Then everybody would manage the city. All right, let's try our last sauce here. Aloha from Hell from
Wow.
Bootsy's Sauce Company. This is one of my favorites, I have to say.
Okay.
And that's not just a shameless plug, so maybe they'll send us some more. This one does have a really nice tropical flavor. I mean, it looks like a pineapple skull. So,
Oh, yeah.
that tells you something right there.
Definitely. Yeah. Intimidating label.
Yeah. Cheers.
All right. Cheers.
Looking 10 years down the road, what's your vision of a Port Angeles where everyone feels secure, housed, and supported?
Well, I think. I think
That was good, right?
Yeah, I'm definitely feeling that one. What I would say is, it's not about so much my vision, right, as it is the community's vision, and that's why we go through such important public exercises relative to our comprehensive plan. That we want to take the input from everyone to help develop a cohesive vision for the community. And while it's not quite 10 years, it's a 20-year vision when it comes to the comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
And we've just gotten some really good feedback to help us get there. I think one of the ones we've talked about is a thriving downtown. The downtown is really the heart of our community. And if we can keep the downtown thriving, I think that's a great way to ensure the rest of the community is also thriving. And part of that is thinking about transportation and getting truck traffic out of downtown and having a great environment within the downtown relative to placemaking, as we talked about before.
Right.
I'm going for the milk.
You gotta.
Quality of life that our residents experience in the downtown we need to be able to have people take a stroll, have a conversation, enjoy the spaces. And oftentimes that truck traffic is disruptive of those opportunities. But also, by tackling that issue, you're going to spur additional investments in the downtown.
Yeah.
As you see more vibrancy, as you see more pedestrians walking in the downtown area, it's just a win-win. So I think looking long-term, I think a successful downtown is one element, but I hope to, from a housing perspective, we can solve the problem, right? That we can recognize we have a major gap relative to incomes and housing affordability. And if we work hard enough at modifying the different policies, changing the incentives, really packaging every opportunity, including things like our permit ready plan set, where we've actually had architectural development of ADUs, duplexes, townhomes that you can come and get for free. Takes a major cost out of the equation for housing development, and particularly ADUs, right? If you can have an ADU developed on your existing property, it's an easier step towards getting an additional housing unit, which is really valuable and a major game changer. So my hope is we actually see more individuals take advantage of the different programs that we've created, but also we continue to develop more. And every year we're going to find new challenges, new burdens as we review each new application. You know, we're finding ways to do things better.
Right. Well, that's fantastic. Well, thank you. Really appreciate your time. Really appreciate your.
I appreciate it, Neil, but I will say, as we get up the scale, right, it really makes it more difficult to answer some of the questions and
Absolutely.
keep focused. But
well, and I'll tell you one thing I've learned. I'm typically a talker. It's way harder to sit still and listen when your mouth's on fire.
yeah,
So equally challenging over here. Yeah.
yeah. But I think this conversation is so important, right? Particularly when you consider the burden that so many of our community members are facing relative to what they've seen with inflation, the cost of food, recognizing that every day the competition for where people put their dollars is so difficult.
Oh yeah.
And I think our families probably daily see stress, anxiety, and challenges relative to food insecurities, and we need to really work hard to change that. And the city plays a significant role in that relative to us working to ensure housing can be implemented inexpensively and making sure that our utility rates are affordable at the end of the day.
Well, I think that's a big one. I think that's something that you probably, as the city, probably have the most specific control over. You know, the hard thing for me in thinking about housing and what happened mid and post pandemic with the influx of more affluent individuals, remote workers, people selling large properties in urban areas where they were selling them for close to $1 million, realizing large gains on that, and then coming over here and seeing, you know, I can get an acre and a house for 300. What if I give you 400? And you know, and the prices of housing just skyrocketing through that, and how does one compete with that?
Right.
And conversely, how does one condemn an individual being a good capitalist and saying my property is now worth so much more, I'd like to sell it for more. And I think with like what you said, if we can tackle the rental problem, then rental rates go down because it's a supply and demand issue.
Yeah.
And if rental rates go down, then more rentals become available to sell because they're not as profitable for people sitting on 5 or 6 or 7 properties. And if more houses hit the market, then through supply and demand, prices tend to come down or at least correct a little bit.
Right.
And where does that, you know, for me, the kind of the existential issue becomes, where does that meet wages and where does that meet cost of living? Because
Absolutely.
You know, we can create all of the downward pressure that we want on the housing market, but if it doesn't come down to where people can afford
In 2017, I was looking at it, and the average Port Angelino could afford $175,000 worth of house, and
Yeah.
the average sale price for a house was $250.
Right.
So that,
Yeah, and look at how much it's changed since then. And
yeah, and I don't know that average purchase power has changed that much,
I don't believe so.
but I do know that the average sale price has gone up
It sure has.
markedly. So yeah, we need more something.
We do.
We do. Not more sauce.
Not more sauce. I do not need more sauce.
No more spice.
I'm good.
Awesome.
Although
Thank
a
you
few
so
of those
much.
I might want to bring home, but
Yeah.
yeah, I will look for those in the store.
Well,
Well, thank you very much.
These are all Washington-based companies. Donated them all to us to try and be on the show. So that was pretty cool.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
It's milk time.
Mm-hmm.
Cheers.
Cheers.